The little girl came running down the quiet American street so fast that she nearly fell to the ground. Tears poured down her face as she waved both arms toward a group of leather-clad bikers standing outside a roadside diner. Her small voice broke through the rumble of motorcycle engines with a desperate cry that no decent person could ignore. She begged them to help because someone was hurting her mother, and every second felt like it might be too late. For a brief moment, the hardened bikers looked frozen, but what happened next would forever change not only one frightened family but also the lives of everyone who witnessed that unforgettable afternoon. Before we continue, if you believe kindness can come from the most unexpected people and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes in compassion, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that restore faith in humanity. The story unfolded in a small town in the United States where people often judged others before learning who they really were. The local motorcycle club was well known around town. Many residents became nervous whenever they heard the deep roar of their motorcycles. Their leather jackets, tattoos, and serious expressions made strangers assume the worst. But beneath those rough appearances were men and women who quietly organized charity rides, delivered food to struggling veterans, and helped families after storms without asking for recognition. Their acts of kindness rarely made the news because they never looked for applause. 8-year-old Grace had no idea about any of that. She only knew she had run out of options. Her mother, Sarah, had worked 2 jobs for years to keep a roof over their heads after life became painfully difficult. They lived in a modest apartment, counting every dollar and celebrating even the smallest victories together. Grace admired her mother more than anyone in the world because Sarah never allowed hardship to steal her smile in front of her daughter. Even on exhausting days, she would read bedtime stories and remind Grace that hope was stronger than fear. That afternoon should have been ordinary. Sarah had returned home after a long shift, completely exhausted but grateful to spend the evening with her daughter. Instead, a frightening situation unfolded that left Grace terrified. Hearing her mother crying out, the little girl did the only thing she could think of. She sprinted outside searching for help, not caring who she found as long as someone would listen. When she spotted the line of motorcycles near the diner, she ignored every warning she had ever heard about bikers and ran directly toward them. The group immediately noticed the panic in Grace's eyes. Their president, a middle-aged rider named Michael, knelt so he could hear her through her sobs. She struggled to explain, but everyone understood enough to know that a frightened child believed her mother needed immediate help. Without hesitation, the bikers called emergency services while several members followed Grace toward the apartment building. They moved quickly yet carefully, determined to protect rather than provoke. Their motorcycles echoed through the neighborhood as worried residents peeked through windows, wondering what was happening. When they reached the apartment, they found Sarah shaken and frightened after a violent confrontation. The bikers never acted recklessly. Instead, they focused on creating a safe environment until authorities arrived. Some comforted Grace, wrapping a warm blanket around her trembling shoulders. Others helped Sarah sit down, offering water and reassuring words while encouraging her to stay calm. Their calm presence transformed a terrifying scene into one where hope slowly returned. Neighbors who had previously avoided the motorcycle club quietly watched in disbelief as these so-called intimidating strangers became protectors. The arrival of emergency responders brought relief, but the bikers did not disappear after the crisis ended. Michael noticed that Sarah's apartment contained very little furniture and almost no food. Grace's bedroom held only a small mattress and a shelf filled with library books that she treasured. The family had been surviving, but barely. Sarah tried to thank everyone while apologizing for needing help, yet Michael gently reminded her that accepting kindness was never something to be ashamed of. Sometimes the strongest people were the ones brave enough to let others stand beside them. Over the next several weeks, something remarkable happened. Members of the motorcycle club quietly organized support without asking for recognition. One rider repaired broken furniture while another collected groceries. A retired mechanic fixed Sarah's old car free of charge so she could continue working safely. One member who had once been a teacher spent afternoons helping Grace with schoolwork, encouraging her confidence after the frightening experience. Another rider painted the apartment walls with cheerful colors, transforming the once gloomy rooms into a warm home filled with light and laughter. As the town watched these changes, long-held assumptions began to crumble. People who had crossed the street to avoid the bikers now stopped to thank them. The local grocery store donated supplies after hearing the story. Churches, schools, and community groups joined together to help other struggling families as well. What began as one desperate child's cry slowly inspired an entire community to become more compassionate. Grace often smiled whenever she heard motorcycles passing because those sounds no longer reminded her of fear. Instead, they reminded her that help can arrive wearing a face the world misunderstands. Sarah slowly rebuilt her confidence. She found stable work with better hours and finally had evenings to spend with Grace. They planted flowers outside their apartment, creating a tiny garden that became a symbol of new beginnings. Every weekend, members of the motorcycle club stopped by just to check on them. Birthdays became joyful celebrations filled with laughter, homemade food, and stories around folding tables. Grace no longer felt alone because she had gained dozens of protective older friends who encouraged her dreams and reminded her she could accomplish anything with courage and kindness. Years later, Grace stood before a crowd during a community appreciation event. She was no longer the frightened little girl who had run through the streets in tears. She had grown into a confident young woman studying to help families facing difficult circumstances. Looking across the audience, she saw Michael and the other bikers standing quietly in the back, still uncomfortable with public attention. She explained that people often judge others by appearances, but the people who saved her family never cared about being heroes. They simply chose compassion when someone needed it most. Her words brought tears to countless eyes because everyone understood that true character is revealed through actions, not appearances. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who still believes kindness can change lives, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment to encourage others who may be going through difficult times. Special request: before this story ends, please comment with the words "Kindness still lives" if you believe one caring decision can change someone's future forever. Grace would always remember that terrifying afternoon, but she chose not to let it define her life. Instead, she remembered the strangers who refused to look away from a frightened child. She remembered hands that offered comfort instead of judgment, hearts that chose mercy instead of fear, and ordinary people who quietly became extraordinary simply because they cared. The greatest lesson was never about motorcycles or appearances. It was about courage, compassion, and the incredible power of showing up when another human being needs hope the most. Sometimes the strongest heroes are not the ones the world celebrates. They are the ones who hear a desperate cry, answer without hesitation, and remind us that even in life's darkest moments, kindness still has the power to change everything.